Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our committee meeting tonight is going to be facilitated by Justin Donahue of our solicitors firm. Did I get your license?
Justin Barbetta.
Barbetta, sorry. So sorry.
Thank you. So we are here again to review with the committee several policies. One which has come back from the last committee meeting, and that is policy number 006.1, remote attendance and participation at board meetings. We're also here to review, I believe it's five different policies from the 900 series, which relates to the district's relationship with the community. That's 903, 904, 906, 919, and 920. Is it the committee's pleasure? Should we start with 006.1?
It's listed there first.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
So this was a proposed, potentially new policy. And the last time that we were here, the committee asked that we put it on for another listing. I believe there were some items that that required further research or further exploration before we came back and discussed it again.
Yeah, I think on this one, I remember that we, or at least I wasn't quite sure that we wanted or needed this policy. And so I think we were sort of just kicking it down to see if, upon further reflection, board members had a desire to enact this type of policy for board members. So I guess I will ask my colleagues if there are any strong feelings towards this policy, but whether we think that we should make a recommendation to the board to adopt this or something like this, remote attendance for board members.
What was some of the hesitancy around bringing this to the full board? We're thinking about adding a policy like this?
Yeah, I think my hesitancy was that I would rather it be sort of extenuating circumstances, which obviously we've seen extenuating circumstances within the last few years. And this one didn't have that type of language in there. It was sort of, I can pull up, it was sort of, factors such as illness, travel, schedule conflicts, weather conditions, other emergency situations would necessitate a board member to participate remotely. And I think because board members are already, allowed to miss two meetings in a row, also for these types of things, I wasn't sure if we wanted folks to feel like they had to attend board meetings like on their vacations or traveling, or if there was a concern sometime in the future if there was a board member who lived here some of the time but not all of the time, and there was just a little bit of a concern about they would have technical residency but not actually be part of the community. So I think those were our concerns last time. But I know, our solicitor has told us there are many districts across the Commonwealth that have this type of policy. So, and I think pre-pandemic even.
That's correct. It wasn't as prominent at that point, but since the pandemic, the majority of the districts have something
And
like
can
this.
I ask where this draft came from? Because I know I had shared with board leadership the current policy that DCIU has in place, which I think was much more constrained than this, if I remember it properly. It wasn't, if you're on vacation and you just want to Zoom, it was more like extenuating circumstances. Like that's the way it was written. So I'm just curious where this draft came from and what happened to the draft that I had shared.
I can speak to this draft. This is the model from PSBA. It's a completely unedited version, and this was, I think, circulated, I want to say actually back in, I want to say 2017 or 2018. And there was an update, I believe, right around the beginning of the pandemic. But it was trivial as far as the substance of the language. I can't speak to the DCIU version. My assumption would be, and this is without anything in support of it, that they edited that version or this version to their liking.
Yeah, sorry,
similar
I
to
don't,
what
I don't
it's
mean
being-
if you know about the DCIU, but board leadership, I guess, Bridget, I had shared that version with you. Is there a reason why we're not also looking at that and kind of comparing the two and seeing if maybe one of those is preferable?
Yeah, I apologize then that I did not attach it to this meeting. I knew we were on the 900s, and when I saw the 600 or the 006.1 in here, it didn't occur to me that that had been suggested. So we can share that with the board.
Yeah, because I mean, I share the concerns in terms of like, if you're traveling, like you should be allowed to do those things and not have to worry about zooming in. But I think that also kind of takes away from us being in person to have these meetings. But just, the DCIU draft that I had shared is very constrained and confined to extenuating emergency circumstances, and you need to seek approval in advance from the board president, who may or may not grant that approval. Not just like, hey, I'm not in town right now, or I don't feel like coming, can I zoom in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this one has a request to the board president, but I would be interested to see if there's language that's being recommended from our intermediate unit about this specific type of policy. So, I mean, I don't see that this one is one of the ones that would need to have immediately. And so I think if we kick the can down the road again, but, if we want to bring this back up, and then at the next policy meeting, we can compare the two side by side. If everyone agrees with that.
I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that works.
And thanks, Kristen, for raising that one again.
Moving on to the 900 series, the first policy for the committee's consideration is 903. That's public participation in board meetings.
Could
So
I just
I wonder-
ask a clarifying question, since the 900 section has more policies than that are listed here? Could you just explain kind of what else is in there, and that this is a subset of
Sure.
the policies?
Sure. So there's approximately, I want to say, between 10 and 15 different 900 series policies, all relating to the district's relationship with the community. We're going to look at 5 of those tonight, and actually one is a consolidation of four other policies related to communications. The expectation is that at the next meeting, we will bring, I want to say, another 5 to 6 policies before the committee for consideration. And those, off the top of my head, I know one relates to federal programs. There are, I want to say, use of facilities to some extent. There's a school
And
visitors policy. Thank you, Dr. Rushi. So it's they weren't broken up in any particular order, other than 903 relates back to 006. That was something that the committee asked that we address early in this process. And then I believe 906 also relates back, as that's the public complaint policy. So those two were put on this meeting's agenda.
Thank you for that context.
So 903, we have we have some significant proposed revisions, as well as a proposed administrative regulation, and some of the substantive content from the district's prior version of the policy was moved into, or was recommended to be moved into the administrative regulation. There's also two major recommended revisions. One relates to the recent court case which came out of a school district in Bucks County regarding the regulation of public comment during the meeting, and then another relates to the recent Sunshine Act amendments that came out in this past year. I believe we did delineate that for your review as well. I don't know if there are any questions or comments from the committee members.
And we're looking at the policy itself. So 903, public participation in board meetings. I can see the edits that have been made. I didn't have very many substantive comments on this one. It looks like in the second paragraph in authority, the end of the first sentence, it says, well, I'll read the sentence. The board recognizes its responsibility for proper governance of the school district and the need for orderly meetings at which to conduct its business in an effective and efficient manner. And I think that just needs to be manner. And then, so I think a lot of this was moved to the ARs, and I did want to discuss just sort of the impetus for that, because I think, for example, the advance request part might fit better here. But I'm wondering if that was, because the difference between a policy and an administrative regulation, as anyone who likes to watch our board meetings knows, a policy, once it's being recommended for a change to the school board, needs to go through 2 full readings at the school board before it's voted on. So it is a pretty lengthy process, and it can take, at least a month and a half, because we have our meetings, at a maximum every 2 weeks. So, whereas the administrative regulations are addressed by the administration, because it's the administration implementing the rule or implementing the policy. And so usually the way that it's broken up is that the policy itself sets the broader rules, and the administrative regulations is what sets up the more the minutia of how that policy is going to be put into effect. And so I'm wondering if that was why these were moved to administrative regulations. Our policies, the very first thing that I checked was making sure that our administrative regulations are listed in our policies. So when you go online, you go to board docs, you can access all of our current policies, and the administrative regulations are right along there with the policy. And so that was my first concern, was how accessible are the administrative regulations, because that's really going back to the advance request, making sure that everyone in the public knows how do they become a participant at our meetings, making sure that they understand what they need to do to be able to be put on the list. So, that's what made me sort of think this should be a part of the policy, but at the same time, it is available right along with the policy itself on board docs. So, I don't know, I just want to get, everyone else, my fellow board members, on your thoughts on moving quite a bit of the meat of this policy into the administrative regulations. If anyone else has thoughts on that. I think a lot of it is really helpful, like termination of a participation statements or presentation, sort of what those types of things, use of electronic recording devices. Those, I think the rest of it, I'm totally fine being in the regulation. I just wonder whether the advance request portion, or at least part of it, could be in the policy itself.
Yeah, I'm thinking one of my comments I had on advance request was the language that said should submit the request to the superintendent. And I know we have a public comment at haverfordsd.net, or I think the instructions on the website when you look at the agenda, also give Kathy Schwartz,
Mhm.
right? So it's like, while the superintendent may get that, I just feel like it should be better to be more clear, like what the practice is.
Especially because it's in the AR and that can be changed really easily. And so we can, I think you put, I guess, we can discuss this, but I wouldn't have a problem putting the actual email address in there
Right.
in the administrative regulation, because if it does change, if in the future we decide, it's going to be a different email address for a different person, that doesn't need 2 readings on the board to change it. So, just make it easier for folks to really understand who they're reaching out to, how to become part of public comment. I think adding that.
A lot of sense. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Can I ask a question related to I guess it's related to the AR. I saw there's a lot of changes there. I know that the change because of the court case, speakers only now have to state that they are a resident of Haverford Township, so they don't have to state their address anymore. That was a change that came out. But I thought that when they submitted the email, they still had to give their address in the email. Is that not true?
That's acceptable. We can't demand, recitation of the address
Out
in front of
loud.
the public.
Okay,
correct.
because that looks like it's not here in the advanced request. It just says the speaker's name and the general subject matter. So
Yep.
that, I think, should be in here, because
Would
when
you-
they send the email, they have to get the address in the email, but not out loud, right? So I think that is just missing
Okay.
from the AR.
I agree, I
Under
had that
advanced
too,
request.
because, yeah, we do, limit the speakers to a resident of the township, so at some point, we should be able to, you get some
verify.
information or
Verify.
have them tell us,
Understood.
the information that.
Right. And then that doesn't get read out loud, but I think you see that, or I don't know who sees that.
Mm-hmm.
The
Kathy,
public
but not
comment,
you.
yeah.
That's right, that's who it is, yeah, okay.
Thinking about that line, I know at a recent board meeting, we had a staff member speak. Do we want to take that practice? We mentioned it was a common practice of the board to allow staff members to speak. Do we want to codify that here?
It is
It's
in
added, I saw
the
that. It was
policy.
Yeah.
added in the new policy.
Where is
There's
It was-
two, who may address the board is a headline of the policy, and it says, any resident or taxpayer of the district may address the board. In addition, at the discretion of the board president or committee chairperson, a single, non-resident representative of each personnel group within the district may be granted permission to address the board on behalf of the entire personnel group.
Okay, so they don't need to give advance requests, which is why they're not up in the top section, is that?
I think they would still need to get, they would still need to be given advance requests, but we're looking at the policy right now, and the policy, purpose, authority, and then the third section, who may address the board. And so this isn't addressing the advance request at all. It's just addressing who is allowed to participate in public comment.
Okay, because the advance request doesn't actually mention staff or representatives of staff groups. Anyway, just to make sure it's consistent
Yeah.
and it's mentioned where it needs to be mentioned. Is my reason.
We could put any resident or taxpayer within the district or other person as allowed by board policy.
Mm-hmm. And so I wanted just to check on this language about a single non-resident representative of a personnel group. Is the goal of this policy to limit the personnel group to have one representative? Or is it based on the non-resident status of the speaker? Because I think that's not clear in here. Because it leaves open the possibility that a personnel group has a resident representative, and that may leave that unlimited.
I think the basis for adding this was to account for the scenario in which a non-resident personnel group leader or member wished to speak on behalf of the group, and they otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. It was not to limit the personnel group to just one individual. So if given your example, if there was a resident who was also an employee of the district and part of that personnel group, and they wished to get up and speak, then per the language, they would be able to do that. It was really almost as a courtesy.
Mm-hmm. So any non-resident staff person would need to kind of coordinate with their leadership of their personnel group and kind of select someone,
Yes.
but resident staff members could speak at will.
Yes.
I think this is, it's a little bit more limited too, because it is at the discretion of the board president or committee chairperson, right? So,
It is.
it wouldn't be, I mean, you would know, right? Like if someone is requesting, just because the advance request also would apply to this person, it would be, they would have to make the request, and then that request would have to be granted by the board president or committee chairperson. And obviously, we wouldn't limit, any resident from speaking.
I like the later language that just says authorized speakers, because I think that's broad enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that language, if we carry that over into the AR,
Mhm.
under like the advanced request, if we just use that language throughout, I think it's very clear. And I think it kind of encompasses a lot of that, so, then we don't have to go back, because if we, for some reason, made a change and permitted some other group to speak or whatever, we wanted to change it for some reason, I don't know what it would be, but if we did, we wouldn't have to go back and change all the language throughout.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that, just making it uniform.
Everything
So
just authorized,
in the administrative regulation where it says any resident or taxpayer within the district,
authorized
just make
speaker.
it authorized speaker, any authorized speaker.
Mhm.
We will make that revision.
Yeah, I like that language a lot.
I had another question about a choice of word in authority in the third paragraph. It talks about responsibility to both operate the schools and provide opportunity for public expression. And I was just curious about the intent of the word expression, since we tend to talk about comment.
Sure.
Expression invites a broader range of
Sometimes the comment is a presentation. So it's not always just going to be limited to spoken word. Sometimes a speaker may have a poster board or some type of literature or something to that effect that gets circulated along with the comment. So
Mhm.
we can certainly revise that.
I wasn't asking for a revision necessarily, I just wanted to point out that word, and, its intended meaning in here.
Yeah, I thought maybe input was a more, because we want public input. That's what, that was the word I was expecting, was input,
Mm.
not expression. I don't know that it matters either way, but I agree.
I like input.
I think we could make that change. I don't know it necessarily changes the, what is allowed. But I think it more, accurately represents what public comment
Yeah,
actually
what the
is.
purpose of public comment is
Mhm.
for input about school-related matters, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Related to that, this might be more for the ARs, but like a recent practice that we've implemented is that if anybody has materials to give to the board, they give them to, I think it's been Greg Parker, who sits kind of in the front.
Sure.
Is that something that we should codify in the AR?
It definitely is, and I already have language for it.
Okay, sorry. I
But
didn't
we
see
were
that.
on the policy, so
Okay.
I didn't say it yet.
Okay, sorry. I was just thinking about it because he just
Mhm.
said,
With
people
the
might have
emails.
posters or flyers
Yeah.
or something.
That's-
Okay.
I'm happy to move to that. I think
No, I don't want to jump the gun. Sorry.
it's okay. So I would put this after use of electronic recording devices and before committee meetings. I called it papers or other materials for the board. And my suggested language would be members of the public should not approach the board during a meeting. If a member of the public has, I guess you know what, I should use authorized speaker.
Mhm.
If an authorized speaker has papers or other materials they wish to present to the board, the authorized speaker shall present the papers or other materials to the person designated by the board to receive such materials.
Mhm.
And just like Ms. Wiedemann has done at the beginning of all of our meetings or at the beginning of public comment to just designate so that folks know, if they have something for the board, something to pass out, then they know who to give it to.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And then I did have another comment on the ARs. The very last, I added this to the very last sentence under committee meetings. The last sentence that's there right now is well encouraged. Public input interaction at committee meetings is still subject to the guidelines of appropriateness and decorum expressed above as to board meetings. And then this is the language that I would suggest adding. Public comment at committee meetings shall occur at a time period specified on the agenda or as announced by the board president or committee chairperson. Only because we do have a specific time for public comment, even at our committee meetings, and I thought that would be in the administrative regulations just good to point out for folks so that they're prepared when that would be.
Can I make one more suggestion on the policy?
Mhm.
The second paragraph under purpose, I feel like it's missing something at the end of that paragraph. Valid, intelligent decisions on important complex matters are made through process of complete information. For this reason, as well as to permit mature deliberation, it's not advisable that the board take action on or deliberate on items for which members do not have full information. Like, I feel like, how is that related to public comment? Right? Because this is a public, like, I agree with that statement, that is accurate, but what does that have to do with public comment? So I feel like it's just missing something. Therefore, we
Tie it
encourage
back.
input from the public related to matters that are on the agenda or maybe on the agenda in the future or something like that, just to tie that information back into the purpose of this particular
How
policy.
about therefore the board encourages input from members of the public regarding,
Or as outlined in this policy.
Yeah,
That's
something
fine,
like
too.
that, yeah, just to kind of tie, because I, that is a good paragraph, I agree that that is important, but just
Right.
tying it back to the purpose of this particular policy.
And to
Mhm.
distinguish that our decisions are not only based on information from the
Yes,
public,
exactly.
but we have
And one,
full
yeah,
information, that's
one
one
component.
component of it, but we
Yes,
also get
yes.
lots of other guidance and
Yes.
resources and information.
I think something else we should keep in mind, though, is that these are public-facing documents, and that the public needs to be able to access and understand them. We just should keep in mind the language should be mutually intelligible. I feel like it gets really bogged down in jargon like permit mature deliberation. Like, if I'm just like a person who wants to speak at a board meeting, I don't know what that means. Like, what is mature deliberation? I think we should keep in mind, as we have this opportunity now to kind of update these policies, that they should be just written in more comprehensive language.
I wondered about the, like, I
Comprehensible.
kind of had a squiggle by the permit mature deliberation too, is not the first phrase that would come to mind there.
I kind of loved it though.
It does invoke a higher standard.
That's fine. Do you have something else you'd rather?
Not on the spot, but I think that's a lens we should be looking at all of these through. I know we need to balance legal language with, making sure these are comprehensible to, all parties of the public, but let's just try to keep that in mind.
has the committee reached a consensus regarding what you want to do with the advance request? Do you want us to move it back to the policy itself, or?
Is there any, I guess, is there, I think there should at least be a reference to advance request here, because if someone looks for the policy on public comment, just like to Ms. Larson's point, they look to the policy on public comment, they find it, they find the policy, they maybe don't realize that there's an administrative regulation, and then they don't realize that they need to make this advance request. And so I guess I just want it to be clear, either, saying advance request as outlined in the administrative regulations or something like that, just to make sure that the person knows where to find that information. I think it's fine because looking at the administrative regulation, it says, by 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting. And, to the extent that we would ever want to change that, I wouldn't want to have to go through, 3 meetings to get, just to be able to change it from like 3 to 2:30 or to 3:30 or whatever it may be. So I think it is best suited here, but I do think that we need to add a line referencing it, just to give everyone, full disclosure.
I think that makes sense.
And maybe it would go in who may address the board. Just a line at the end, like all authorized speakers, must submit an advance request as outlining the procedures and the administrative regulations or something like that.
Please consult the ERs for additional information, link, click on it.
Right. It's right there. Like it is in board docs. They're right next to each other. So it is, but I'm just, I'm thinking everyone is busy and they think they found the answer and they didn't realize that there was another one. And so just a reference to it.
And it has been our practice that the advance requests were taken for the regular public board meeting, but not for committee meetings. Do we think, I know that the advance request does allow for recognition from the floor, but do we think it covers both types of meetings adequately?
I think so.
So how does the residency requirement work for committee meetings? Is that spelled out? Did I miss that?
It doesn't make it doesn't,
Distinguish it.
it doesn't distinguish between the two.
Okay.
So,
I just know if people are coming up on the spot, they're not giving their address out. So how do we confirm residency then?
We
think we-
do ask people to at least attest, to say, I am a resident. And I guess if there's reason to suspect that is not the case, somebody can
Like if they come with
object
a
or
Boston
ask for
license.
clarification. or
no,
something.
no. I think until unless we have a problem with that, I think we can take everyone at their word.
Wait, so we're not requiring the same advanced request for committee meetings that we are of?
Well,
I think the policy allows us to do that.
right.
And
Okay.
the policy also allows us to take requests from the floor at now what we'll say at the designated
Okay.
time in
So
the committee agenda.
I was just thinking that we were just gonna have one policy that, like, all of our meetings, whether they're a business meeting or a committee meeting, like, this is just how,
That's what this is.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It doesn't distinguish, but I think, like Ms. Wiedemann was saying, the practice at committee meetings is to allow more.
Okay. I see.
And that is in the policy, that it's the committee chairperson at their, the board president, committee chairperson's discretion.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
I will note, not necessarily for purposes of amending the discussion or the presentation that we have here, but I have heard other districts have different practices regarding signing up for public comment, including kind of a check of addresses maybe in the back of the room before entering the meeting space, or filling out a card that then they write their address on. Something just to keep in mind. We could, if at some point our practice became unmanageable or had some issues, we could look to how other districts around the area or the state, what kind of practices they put in place, because there is some variety here in how this is handled.
Right, for sure. And I think that's something, that's why the administrative regulations are there, right? Because it's such like a nitty gritty aspect to it that it could fit there very well if the change needed to happen. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, one other thing I was thinking about as I read this, it's not really related to public participation in board meetings, but anyone can email the board or the superintendent at any time, and I was wondering if it was worth reiterating that here. Although this is specifically about participation in board meetings, but if somebody were reading this to see, like, am I gonna give a public comment or not? Like, you can always email us, and here's that information. I didn't know if that would be appropriate to put here, but just, in terms of thinking about how to interact or how to communicate with the board or with the superintendent.
You could put it in if you wanted to, but.
I didn't know if that was like
I
a
mean,
good idea or not.
the reason for having it is really to regulate
Okay.
the public comment
Okay.
period
Mhm.
during,
Okay.
so. Are we ready to move on to 904?
Yep.
So 904 is public attendance at school events. Some of the major changes, and I'll note that this was adopted back in 2010. I don't think there was a recent revision to it. Some of the major changes refer to tobacco use and distribution at district events. There's also an addition toward the end related to the Safe Schools reports, which obviously the district was fulfilling its obligations, but now it's part of the policy. And I believe we also referenced, we maintained, right. Thank you, Dr. Rushi. We maintained the memorandum with local law enforcement. We also have submitted for your review a proposed administrative regulation. And this is taken, again, directly from PSBA's model language. It's a comprehensive list of expected behaviors at district events, and it's really just for your consideration to digest and let us know, what, if any, of this is something you want to maintain or keep it. It may not be feasible. It may not be the district's current practice, but it just gives you some ideas and items to review.
I think it would be good to start with the policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had several suggested revisions here. The way that it was written out in definitions, it says disruptive and therefore prohibited conduct on school premises or at school-sponsored events includes, but is not limited to, the following. And then the first bullet is discrimination / harassment / incivility. And I think that those should be 3 different points, because I just think that I don't think any one of them should be diminished by being sort of put together with another one. I also, when I first read incivility, I thought to myself, what does that mean? But then, as I continued my policy review for tonight, I found out what incivility means. Spoiler alert, it's coming up later tonight. And so I just think that we should reference that policy when we say incivility, because there is, if the board decides to adopt that policy, then it will be very well laid out. And incivility just seems like one of those very ambiguous terms that doesn't have quite a good meaning without being defined. Tobacco is listed in the bullet points, but I think that we should list it as use of any tobacco product, because we specifically define later tobacco product. So that needs to stay consistent. The next bullet point, the possession or use of controlled substances, I would add prohibited by state or federal laws before on school premises, because that again aligns with the way that we refer to controlled substances throughout our other policies and in the AR, the suggested AR. Moving down to the possession or use of weapons, I would add or dangerous devices prohibited by the district, which I thought was a good way to put it, that was in the AR, so I'm taking that from the AR and putting it into the policy. And then I would also add a bullet point for activities that may result in the damage or destruction of district property, which I think, again, was another one from the AR that I felt would be worthy to have in this definition as well. Just so I'll get all of my comments out and then other folks can jump in. But the next sentence right after the bullet points, it defines tobacco product. And then the next sentence after that defines tobacco product again. And so, this sentence, state law defines the term tobacco product to broadly encompass not only tobacco, but also vaping products, including the product marketed as Juul and other electronic cigarettes. And I would just think that should just be one of the bullet points below tobacco products, instead of having 2 separate definitions of tobacco product. So I would the next sentence reads, tobacco products for purposes of this policy and in accordance with law shall be defined to include the following. And I would maybe just make that the very first bullet point. Because I didn't immediately see the reason to break that up. I think those are all of my comments on this. Under authority, I would say, so the very first sentence under authority is the board has the authority to prohibit any individual from attending a school event whose conduct may constitute a disruption. But I wonder if that should be the board, the superintendent, or the superintendent's designee, or maybe even building principal, because there are a lot of school events that happen without the board and should continue to happen without the board. So, just making it sure that they would also have the authority to prohibit an individual from attending a school event whose conduct, falls into one of these categories.
In that one, the use of word may there concerned me, because an individual whose conduct may constitute a disruption would be prohibited seems like some amount of future telling that is hard to discern or put into a policy. I'm not sure where this, like, if a person has been disruptive previously, they may have a period of suspension or a time that they're not allowed to attend, but I can imagine lots of people with the potential to maybe constitute a disruption, but that doesn't mean we stop them from ever coming in. So I just wanted to be careful about that may in that sentence and think about what authority that grants the superintendent, principal, or board.
I totally agree with that. I think that's a really good note.
If I could interject
Yes.
on that. Yeah, the only issue with limiting it to whose conduct does constitute or is being disruptive is you're eliminating the opportunity to regulate something before it happens. So the example that comes to mind in my head is a football or basketball game. There's something kind of starting in the parking lot that's working its way toward the front door. They calm down before they enter the front door, and then something happens in the facility. It's one of those things where we are trying to give the district more leeway when something is noted that could potentially become problematic.
I don't know then if it's possible to add some concept of like for cause, or I'm not sure what
Immediacy, I'm almost thinking like that's like it's about to happen. You know what I mean? Because I was thinking more literal, almost like someone has a baseball bat, right, and they're about to destroy property. Like they haven't destroyed the property, right, but they're quite clearly about to. And so, if certainly in that circumstance, you wouldn't want to have to wait until it was done. So I don't know if we wanted to add some sort of time component to it. Yeah, right. Yes, thank you.
Whose conduct does or may constitute an immediate disruption.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. I would like to go back up to the first page under definitions. And what would be the last bullet point, but it's a part of the second to the last bullet point, where it says activities prohibited and other board policies. What activities might those be, and how would someone know where to find them?
Sure, that's a great, it's, to an extent, it could even be the student code of conduct, because our student code of conduct's referenced in some of our student policies in like the 200 series. So that is a great point, though, and if it would make the committee more comfortable, we can kind of take inventory of the prominent policies and maybe cross-reference them.
Yeah, I think we should keep that in because we could have a future board policy for some sort of disruptive conduct that wouldn't be included here. And so having that in place ties this into any future policy that we have, that we maybe haven't contemplated yet. But I certainly do think that, and because the first one that would come to my head of other board policies is harassment and discrimination, and those are quite clearly laid out here. And I think even though we obviously have board policies for that conduct, disallowing that conduct, they are and should be referenced here. And so if there are other ones in our board policies, then we should include them here as well. I think that's a good comment.
I had another just kind of organizing question to this. So this is public attendance at school events, and I think that a lot of these behaviors are also expected of our students and would be reason from. So is it correct that this mirrors to some extent expectations for students and staff, not just public, right?
Yes.
So then I was surprised about the Office for Safe Schools report being here. Is it in other policy as well? Because, I mean, I understand the Office for Safe Schools isn't just reporting on our students, but it's by any person on school property. But I guess this just wasn't the policy I was expecting to see that reporting requirement in.
Yes, I want to say it's in 2 or 3 other, maybe
Okay.
even more policies in the current manual.
So this is just the notice that the public behavior on school grounds at school events is captured in the Office of Safe Schools. Okay. And I guess one other question, kind of going back to just how to implement and how the public might read this. One of the sections under authority here is about the special considerations for school events, and the second item is about the admission of senior citizens. And it says that they're able to obtain a gold card from the Office of Community Relations. And I'm not familiar with either the gold card or the Office of Community Relations, and just wanted to make sure that those are things in our district.
Stood out to me as well.
And that office would actually be Anna Deacon's office.
Okay.
The gold card, I'll have to go back and check on that. I know that was something that
It was
they
a
could
thing.
come to shows.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know that we're still doing it.
And if we
Might
do
be
still.
called something else now. I mean, we're not prohibiting
Mhm.
senior citizens from going.
No,
But
it's
the idea that
it's the
they're-
platinum card now. So if this does still exist, are we advertising it on the website, or could we? So if people 65 and older are interested in obtaining this card, they can look it up and it's there, as opposed to finding it in a policy.
Yes.
Just one other thing, and this is more just me trying to wrap my head. So the title is Public Attendance in School Events. And I guess I'm thinking of, like, when working with students, I know we're talking about the public, but like, you're trying to reinforce positive behavior, right? And it's like, we welcome you, but don't do any of these things. I think it's just the nature of this policy and the way it has to be, but I wish we could put more affirmative.
They're welcomed in the very first sentence. That's not enough.
You're welcome to not do any of this. But
Yes.
yeah.
I thought when I looked at it, I'm like, wow, there's an awful lot on tobacco use. Like the weight of that in this one surprised me. But yeah, I think it maybe is a little out of balance to say the board welcomes the public at athletic, musical, and other events, and then go through 3 pages of.
Well, so this is policy 904 though. And so, I mean, I know why we're going through it the way that we are, but one of the policies that I think we're going to talk about last tonight at length talks about how we welcome the public. And it's because it really is a combination of our current policies, 901, 902, I think 910, maybe another one. And so I think if anyone who's reading this top to bottom, starting with 901 and then going farther, I mean, they will get the sense that we are welcoming the community. But certainly in this policy, it is mostly about, please don't do this.
Is that an accurate title then? Is this what PSBA recommends as a title for this kind of policy?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Are we ready to transition to,
I guess just one
Yeah.
other
The
quick
ARs?
question, because I looked at the PSBA's recommended language, and, I mentioned the comment I had on the senior citizens and the gold card. They also, PSBA also listed, considering guidelines for free admission for like district personnel. Is that a practice of the district? And if so, should we specify it in our policy that district personnel don't pay to attend, I guess, sporting events or musical concerts, plays?
Some we do.
Okay, so
Some-
it's not
some we do.
it's not a
Like
general
sometimes
practice.
if there's a PIAA event.
I was just gonna say,
You know, there are some events
Hmm.
That's not-
Yeah.
that we do.
And that was another topic that was in the or in the PSBA about whether or not we accept athletic passes from districts that are conference members. I don't know if that's
Mhm.
something to specify here, but
and that's, it's kind of like a smorgasbord. They give you every
Mhm.
option available, and practices in North Central PA or Western PA may not be Southeastern PA, so.
okay. So I'm ready for the ARs then.
Okay. I have a global comment in the ARs, and that's that I think we go back and forth between referring to products in the singular versus the plural, and I think that it makes more sense to just use the singular throughout. So, possess or use any weapon or dangerous device prohibited by the district instead of weapons or devices. I think that we can refer to them as cell phones, not cellular telephones. But I do think that and I said, including using a cell phone and then I added or other electronic device in a disruptive manner, because I do think that we need to cover more than cell phones. We don't even know what's going to be out in like 10 years. And this was last looked at in, well, let's see, this AR is new, but the policy itself is from 2010. So I think I had like a razor then. I don't know.
So
But
maybe then we did call them cellular telephones.
so we did call them cellular telephones, yeah. So, for sure, updating the language. So that was my global comment. And then number 15, I actually like laughed out loud. I don't know do we have a problem with roller skating and rollerblading?
I mean, it's risky behavior.
So it says, it's, individuals attending school events on district property will not, and then it says engage in any risky behavior such as roller skating, rollerblading, or skateboarding. And so I was kind of laughing to myself, and then I was thinking, what was the genesis for this? Is there something? And I guess what I could think of is destruction to property, because I certainly do know that some types of skateboarding can result in destruction to property, but I think that we have that covered. And so I would hope, I mean, you know, I'm happy to hear other comments, but I would think that folks can skateboard to an event or rollerblade.
Right. I actually had a comment by here to expand it, because I observed kids biking through the stadium and like on the track and in the end zone, and it was during a soccer game, and a dad who's also a police officer was like, okay, I'm going to put an end to this. But it did make, that I consider that to be risky and potentially damaging behavior. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, let's get bikes not, like bikes not
Well, I guess maybe we could,
cool things.
what if we just change the language to make it using these different modes of transportation in a risky way? Because like, what I was thinking of was, I mean, people, my brother skateboards, and so it's like, just skateboard, he'll skateboard to CVS or whatever, but you know what I mean? It's nothing destructive. It's nothing bad. It's just like, that's his mode of transportation. And so,
But not down the hallway.
but not down the hallway or
aisle
on the
during-
field. No, right. I mean, listen, if anyone says we do have a problem with people skateboarding in a dangerous way, then we should keep it as is. But that's, I was just thinking, especially because it didn't include bicycles. I was just, it's a dig on those roller skaters.
Well, we also have the concept of signs that are,
Mhm.
no skateboarding in an area that
Right.
have become very popular for skateboarding, it's, you know, potentially dangerous for the skateboarder, but
Mhm.
also potentially damaging to the concrete,
Right.
the surfaces that are used to achieve flight and speed.
Right. And so I guess if we could just change that to tie it together, like, because I think right now the way that it reads is that all roller skating, rollerblading, and skateboarding is inherently risky.
Right.
But I don't think that that's
The intent.
what we mean to say.
Right, so
Perhaps that.
humans on wheels become projectiles. It's being Heelys too, right? There's
Heelys.
wheels.
Oh my gosh. Now we're really back to 2010. What was that? 2005?
Maybe
Sorry, I'm
just
back.
something like that that causes disruptions or damages property or something like that.
Yeah, I think like
Maybe not disruption.
engaging in this and like we include roller skating, rollerblading, skateboarding, bicycling in a way that is risky or, you know, may cause destruction to property. So yeah.
I agree. I think it's definitely helpful to tie the exact risk versus stigmatizing all, you know. I saw a father and son skateboard to school, Chestnut Walk, the other morning. And so when they were done and dad took his skateboard and, you know, they should be allowed to skateboard. Yeah.
I mean, obviously if there's signs up that say you cannot skateboard in that area, that, you know, those need to be abided by as well. But
Right.
yeah, for this, I think tying it together.
Maybe we can leave that sentence, and I think, Antoinette, now that I'm reading, it's like, when I think of risky behavior, being on wheels is not the first thing I think of. So like maybe, like the 14 talks about operate a motor vehicle in a risky manner. So maybe kind of condense all those, you know, risky wheeled things and just make that the topic or the lead of the sentence.
Right, because I mean, honestly, because that has posted signage as well, right? Which we also know applies to skateboarding. So I think, yeah, you're right. I think we could just combine those two. I didn't have any other comments on this one, but I, you know, maybe.
Just one grammatical one is, I think the practice is to update district with a capital D in reference to our specific school district, and throughout, capitalize the district with a capital D.
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking at, going back to line 1, where it says, okay, individuals attending school events on district property will not injure, threaten, harass, or intimidate a district employee, sports official, or coach, or any other person. Should we include students or athletes? I mean, it gets a little specific and then just stops being specific. But I figure if you're on school property, there's probably students present.
I think it's covered with.
It's covered?
It is.
Alright.
I mean, any other person is the catch-all. So.
Okay,
I think those are the people that are most likely to be.
harassed.
Yes.
or intimidated. Okay.
Yeah. Sports officials.
Yeah.
Is there any other feedback from the committee? I think that brings us to 9:06.
For those keeping track at home, we don't have a 905.
9:06 is public complaints. And again, this was this was adopted in 2010. So there's almost 12 years in between. What we've done is we've largely incorporated the language from PSBA, which I think was just updated within the last 2 years. There's again an accompanying administrative procedure, which has the majority of the process outlined. And there's two separate processes described. There's a general complaint procedure, and then there's a federal programs complaint procedure, which is required by the state.
And we have spent time looking at that when we updated our Title IX and other
Mhm.
policies that federal complaints. Okay.
I didn't have very many comments to this policy. I would add under authority, I would include school directors, and I'll read the sentence. This policy should not be construed to constitute an entitlement to meet with, and then I added school directors, and then it goes on to say district staff and or administration nor shall it be interpreted to create rights to pursue complaints that do not affect the complainant's interests in the subject of the complaint. And the impetus for adding school directors here was that in the administrative regulations, there is a process where at some point it could become, or it could be in front of the board. And so I thought it was important to add that level as well.
For human people to interpret this sentence, what does it mean, interpreted to create rights to pursue complaints that do not affect the complainant's interest in the subject of the complaint? What does that mean?
You can't complain about something for someone else.
Okay.
It has to be you.
Okay, all right. I
Can
think
we
I got
say
that, but
that?
kind of going back to Ms. Larson's earlier point is that I don't know that that's necessarily obvious to the general public. So maybe if there's a way to just reword that a
Okay.
little bit, just to make it maybe more plain language. I mean, that makes sense. Now that you say that, I get it. Okay, but that was not my initial.
We could even say interpreted to create rights to pursue complaints on behalf of others,
On behalf of the interests of others.
behalf of the interests of others.
Is that okay?
That makes more sense.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense.
You don't have to diagram a sentence to figure out.
I know, right? Like,
So does this outline kind of like a chain of steps that a complaint should go through? Like, things shouldn't be necessarily escalated to the superintendent or to the board immediately. If you're going through like a formal complaint process, like there are actually steps that you should follow, and if things continue to escalate, then you kind of pursue those higher.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's the AR. So the AR lists the formal complaint procedures, which again, because the administrative regulations are really how to implement the policy. And so the policy is the broad strokes, and the administrative regulation really takes it down to, the day-to-day, what it would look like. And so there are 4 levels in the formal complaint procedures listed here in the policy, or in the administrative regulations.
Now, we know people don't necessarily follow these, so I'm wondering if we should do like, I don't know, some sort of asynchronous something, like just a quick like, hey, these are the levels if you want to file a complaint, like these are the steps. Not that everyone would watch it, but just I feel like a lot of times people get upset about something and they're like, I'm going to go right to the board, I'm going to go right to the superintendent. It's like there are levels and there's a process in place. Like, I guess how can we educate the public on this actual regulation?
Yeah, to that end, I wondered if even a cross-reference in the, like, public participation in board meetings or, like, was suggested about, just even if where we say, this is how to reach the board if you have an email, but to maybe also reference this, as you said, the kind of process or chain of command could be helpful in having someone more clearly understand the opportunities to raise their complaint and then kind of the protocol that we consider to be most effective.
Even a flow chart. I mean, of course, people can still escalate and go like right to the top if that's what they feel they need to do, but like, I feel like these things can more effectively be resolved at lower levels of this.
And I think that can be communicated when someone does reach out and,
Yeah.
Even if they're calling my office, the very first question that is asked is, have you spoken with the building principal?
Mm-hmm.
And we try to explain to people why that's of more benefit, because quite often I won't even know what the individual is talking about. I would need to go back and get more information anyway. So I think we could certainly, direct people to that. While certainly I know you're well-intended, I don't know that the creation of a flow chart, that people are gonna read that.
Just something like, I think it shows more respect to the entire system and people at all levels of the system.
And if I may, because I know the comment was raised about cross-reference with 903, the issue with that is that 903 is for again, matters that are either on, like a voting item on that agenda, or a matter which may ultimately be
Mhm.
brought before the board to take action on. So,
Separate.
my son or daughter or relatives' issues within a certain classroom, that's not necessarily gonna be something that, would warrant, cross-referencing through public comment channels.
Mhm.
So,
Especially because public comment has specific laws around it as well, right? So I wouldn't want it messy, like, I wouldn't want it to look like our public comment policy is trying to refer people away from that,
Restricted, yeah.
because, yeah. But I do think it could warrant, a cross-reference in the policy that I've talked about now a couple times, the big one that's coming later. And just because that really is about community engagement. And so, if we, when we get to that, we could think about adding something like that here, or adding, a reference to it. In this one, in the administrative regs, and I just had a nit, and then the bullet point, it says attempts to resolve formal complaints shall begin with informal, direct discussions among the affected parties. Only when these informal discussions fail to resolve the complaint shall the more formal process as outlined in below be utilized. And I just think in should be struck.
thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And then, procedures for federal programs complaints, we refer to, ESSA, ESSA, and I think that should be spelled out.
Okay. Is there any other feedback from the committee?
Okay, moving on.
So our next proposed policy, it's a new proposed policy. It has been referenced several times throughout the night, and it is a civility policy.
So real question really quick, because it's referred to as both 920 and 919. Okay, did you already catch that?
Yes. So it should be 919.
Okay. Yeah, so in the
Um,
policies that we just went over, it's referred to, I think, throughout as 920. Yeah.
Yes. So that would be corrected
Okay.
before the first read. And we have also proposed an administrative regulation along with the policy itself. Generally speaking, it's just a general approach to interactions amongst the district employees, the school community at large. And if there is a legal requirement, for example, a meeting that has to occur with a student who's in a particular class or something to that effect, we can't stop the meeting for the civility policy. Now, what you may be able to do is say, let's all take a step away and come back in a few minutes.
Mhm.
But it's really just to encourage our interactions to remain civil.
I liked this policy a lot. I had no notes. Never happens. Don't expect it again. I had notes on the AR, I think.
I think I'm hearing no comments on
Okay.
the policy itself.
Okay. We'll move to the
ARs.
the AR. And this does actually reference 906 for the comment made by the chair earlier.
And what I would suggest to add to that would to just also, in accordance with board policy 906, formal complaints and its accompanying administrative regulations, since, really how to go about that is mostly in the regs. So just making sure that we have a reference to that as well.
I don't know if there are any further comments or questions from the committee.
It's a straight period. Other than that.
I thought this one did a good job in putting some of these concepts in plain and relatable language, so I appreciated its more accessible readability and interpretation.
Yeah, I agree. Right, and so, as I mentioned earlier, we talk about incivility in one of the policies, and this, having a reference to the way that civility is defined here in quite a broad way, I think will just tie it all together and really be really illustrative for what we expect of ourselves and our community at school events.
And also just keep an eye out for other policies where this might be cross-referenced as well going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so that brings us to our final proposed policy for the evening. That is a communications policy, which we're proposing to move forward and adopt as 920. And at the same time, we would be repealing 902, 910, and 911. I'm sorry, 901, 902, 910, and 911. What we did at this point is to synthesize the different components of each of those four policies into one policy that deals with all communications from the district, and to allow for feedback. Because I think as one of the committee members mentioned, some of the language is outdated due to
It's from the 90s.
the length of time in between.
99. Oh no, wait. I definitely saw this. Oh, maybe not. No, I'm right. 910 was from 1999, October 21st.
So yeah, the 901, 902, 910, and 911 were community relations objectives, communications program, community relations, and news media relations. So just even the titles indicate some possible consolidation.
Why is it being suggested as 920 instead of like 901?
Well, since we already have a 901 that is technically currently in existence, we would be. I mean, we could do it this way, but it would be a much smoother transition to just create a new policy with a new number, rather than essentially deleting the entire currently existing version of 901 and then filling it with. I mean, we could do it that way, but
I guess
we'd also have to change the title of it.
Okay, right. And so that was my question. So, because in PSBA, for example, do they still split these up into 4?
No.
No? Okay, so what do they have it as?
There's a general communications policy, and I do not recall the number. It is, I want to say it's a 9 in something in the teens.
Okay.
That they're recommending now.
So I guess I just would have preferred it up front, because I think this lays out, a lot of really important initiatives for the board, and I'm sure, initiatives that the public appreciates. It's all about having communication with the public and welcoming communication. And so, I guess I would have just preferred that it go up front in our 900 policies, but I can understand you know, the issues
We
with
can
that.
certainly still do it that way.
I don't know, what does everyone else think? It's just like, and then our, once we repeal those 4, we won't have we'll just start at 903. We won't have 901, 902. We'll start at 903, and then we'll go all the way up to 920. And so, I mean, I know we do this throughout because of just the way that it's referenced, you know, in PSBA and models and things like that. But if we're going to repeal 901 anyway, you know.
Would it make sense to lead with the civility one then? Kind of have that undergirding everything and then communicate? I mean, because then it kind of gets into this shuffling of.
I think the only problem with that is that then it wouldn't match up with like PSBA and recommendations and things like that. Whereas like if we were going to do this one, which is proposed communications, which let's see, what's the proposed title is.
So what you're saying is this is typically 901 in other contexts.
I'll let you answer.
No, it's not.
not.
It's, I want to say it's,
I'm
I'll
just
have
being
to look into
difficult.
it. I want to say it's like 916 or something.
I haven't
like
mastered
that.
the numbering system yet. Okay, all right.
I'm good.
I'm
from
just
memory,
being-
but not that good.
I'm just being difficult, I guess, just because I wanted this to go first, but it's not. It's really not that big of a deal.
We can certainly do that.
We'll get a way to get it first.
We can certainly do that.
Okay. We can talk about the substance of it as well because I do have notes.
I have notes on this too, yeah.
Understood.
I will just note Ms. Wiedemann's comment from earlier, capitalizing the D in district throughout. I saw a couple instances of that. The third paragraph I had a lot of comments on, and so I think Board of Education here, that's referring to us, right? The school board.
Yes.
So I think we should refer
That's
to
not
ourselves.
language that we use
Yeah,
in
that's not
others.
language that we use since 1999. So, you could just say the school board of the school district of Haverford Township or however, but I mean,
School directors.
Board of School Directors, yeah. And then I'm just going to read what I have, which is very different from this. So the Board of School Directors recognizes that it is imperative that communication be maintained in both directions between the district and the community. So I struck a lot there. And then I added a cooperative relationship should exist between the district and the community at large. And I'm taking that sentence from the last sentence in the next paragraph because I thought it fit better there. And then I go on, the board believes that providing a good educational program in its schools, the students will be better contemporary citizens of the community. So instead of students, originally, we had young people being trained.
Yep, that was
Which
one of my
was-
comments. It was a little
Felt
strange.
creepy,
Yes.
weird. And I did want to change future citizens to contemporary citizens, which aligns with our district goals. And they're not future citizens, they're current citizens.
Right.
So that was another change that I made to that.
Right, and you can't be better in the future if you're still in the past and you're not there yet, so.
They're a young person being trained.
No, I like that. I think you cleaned up a concern of mine that talked about the district's imperative to communicate with groups, which groups seem
The
to
groups, what
dismiss
does that mean?
individuals.
It's the
right?
community, it's all the community. Yeah, right.
We could say maintain dialogue. I mean, no one says we maintain communication in both directions. It's just, I don't know. I think there's a more contemporary way to say most of these things. But, did you have more?
I didn't have more in the purpose section. I had
had,
more.
again, kind of going to the, what would be the 1, 2, 3, 5th paragraph, an understanding of the purposes is it is the joint responsibility of the board, the professional and classified staffs, the students and parent, family, guardian groups. Again, that concept of groups seems a little strange in there. And then I wasn't sure about the professional and classified staffs, if that's if those are the categories that we refer to the district employees in other contexts.
Yeah, we could just say district employees, right? Or district personnel. I mean, if we want to, I don't know, employees.
That seems
it
more
takes a-
broad or inclusive.
Yeah.
Does
employee
PS
can sometimes specific definition, so if we use personnel.
Does PSBA have like updated suggested language? I just feel like this is very wordy and stumbling over itself. And I think the more concise we can make it, the better.
There is a model communications policy.
Maybe look at that. Because like even I have a problem saying providing a good educational program. Like that just sound, I know what that means, but like I think we strive for more than that. So just, yeah.
Yeah, and I think this was just taken directly from our existing old
Right.
policies and just smushed together, which I appreciate. There's no reason for these to be 4 separate policies. But certainly a lot of this was worded in a weird way, and
It was smushed together with some thought behind it.
you guys did a great job. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say no. I just mean I'm not blaming our solicitors.
Original language was a little weird.
It's outdated,
Yeah.
weird language. That's
Right,
that's
so
all.
If we can look
Do
at
you wanna
modern
look at the-
language and tailor it to, or customize it to, you know, the district, then I think that makes more sense.
Would it make sense to circulate a copy of the current PSBA model and bring this back
I think that might make
Yeah.
sense,
for
yeah.
the committee?
Yeah.
Sure.
idea.
I do have other comments though, and again, I think it would be helpful just for you to hear them now, because to the extent that they're in the other one, I throughout, you know, it's odd because sometimes they include guardians, you know, parent, family, and guardians, and sometimes it's just parents. And so this was a global comment to just change it to guardians. I mean, if we want to do parents and guardians, but certainly in like 6C, for example, it just says make parents feel welcome in the school office. I think it really should be and guardians. And I also, just going back up to responsibility, number 4, it says to operate when required by law in public session as speedily and efficiently as circumstances permit and with public participation. And then I would add as outlined in the board's policies, because we have very, you know, we have robust policies on that, so might as well refer back. 6C, where I was just referencing the need for an addition to guardians, I would add at the end, so make parents and guardians feel welcome in the school office and in the classroom, and then I would add during appropriate times. D, cooperate with the parent-teacher organizations and other community groups, and then I would add related to the schools. Then going down, we have, you know, responsibilities of the board, and we seek to achieve effective school community relations, and then we have several listed out. Number 1 is encouraging visits to the school. I would again add at appropriate times. And then it goes on encouraging the public to attend school events subject to the school visitors policy 907. And then I would add and all other applicable board policies, because we obviously just went over several that would apply to that. The second one, supplying school information, it says to the news media. I would strike to the news media and just say for public consumption. Because I think a lot of folks get their news from our website or, you know, directly from Dr. Rushi. So, you know, we're really supplying that information directly to the people in a lot of circumstances. And so I think my comments were to these last ones. I have several that are similar to my other ones, which is just relating them back to school-related topics. For example, in the next one, encouraging special meetings with guardians and teachers in the schools for news and information about curriculum, guidance, and other school-related topics as they arise. Because it just said, et cetera, which means nothing. Making available to community groups the school plants and facilities for cultural and other purposes in accordance with guidelines. And then I added and board policies.
Or school plants. I mean, what is that referring to? Obviously not plants, but like.
I think it is referring to plants. Is it referring?
Community groups, the school plants and, I think it means like facilities, right? A plant, like if we had a factory
just say
on.
facility.
We have a factory. It's
Like, I really don't know what that.
the young people being trained in the factories.
I think facilities will suffice.
Facilities is
Yeah,
better.
this is a real artifact.
This might be the 99 one.
Did you have anything else?
Of course. So the next one, I have cooperating with community groups, organizations, industries, chambers of commerce, etc., in providing information and services, and I have where appropriate. And then number 7, making school directors available to meet with, I said, members of the community or organizations relevant to the schools to present information which is of special interest to the group. So those were just some of my notes, and I mean this might be completely different under PSBA, but I do think that if we look at this, you know, with sort of our flavor, what our district has done, and then are able to compare it to PSBA, then we'll have some sort of super policy.
Right. I think your additions were helpful. I think I looked at it as like maybe at a more 10,000 foot, and I was like, item 6, I was kind of like, what? The teaching staff, personnel, that, you know, community opinion depends on the daily life of the school. They should seek the following objectives as opportunity permits, it does say, and then it puts a lot of obligations on our staff to comply with that. And I also thought with the board, responsibilities, you know, to do those things as listed, which I think the improvements that you made were relevant
Yeah, a lot of
and
them are
helpful.
way too broad.
But
they didn't mean
also-
anything because it wasn't specific. Yeah.
Yeah, I was also like, I'm not sure we need something that expansive. And then it says about for continuous board policy consideration, which again, like continuous, I'm like, what? Like that some of it just was a little too much.
I will say that these older policies are much more esoteric, and that the current version of PSBA's model, it's much more streamlined on who is the chief communications officer of the district, who do we contact for comment regarding, you know, issues within the district, those kind of things. So it's going to look much different.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One population that I noted wasn't specifically referenced in here when they talk about community groups and media, and that was our like legislative representatives, elected officials, and I feel like that's a constituency that we have. It's important for us to communicate with as part of our advocacy for public education, and wondered if this was a place to include them in a list of audiences with which the board feels it's important to have a communication.
We certainly could. I mean, there's also, I believe in our next meeting, there's going to be a relationships with municipalities.
Okay.
That may not be the technical.
Municipal
Right.
government
Municipal,
relations.
yes.
Yeah, 909.
Yes.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, elected officials might be broader than that.
Right.
And we, engage in, communications with neighboring school districts, with state and federal representatives. So just would like it to be considered that they be included when we talk about the audiences that we communicate with.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that this is such an interesting policy because it's not based in any law, right? And so a lot of our policies, they're really the board, the district implementing Pennsylvania law, right? And so, but this is really for us. These are our goals. This is how we want to represent ourselves, and so adding that, which is something that I think that we in Haverford do very well, advocating for our students, for our community with our legislative representatives, that's a great thing to highlight here, right? And it's not, it doesn't need to fit into a specific box like how the public comment one did, right? Because that's based on state law. So I would say I just encourage everyone to think of things like that for these policies that are really for the board, right? For the board, for the community.
That was actually one of my questions. So are there federal or state laws that we need to be following to be incorporated? Or do we have certain requirements under the law in our communications? Or is this clearly just up to us?
The only, and I can tell you that, the PSBA model doesn't go this far. It would be the privacy of students and if there was any type of a communication that's issued.
Right.
But that's not, I don't think that's really what you were asking.
No,
right?
Is the other one, I'm sorry, just to interject, aren't there, I'm thinking laws that we're bound to about making are communications and content accessible?
There is a, sorry, yeah,
Or like language accessibility?
Language,
yeah,
and then
it's-
like how we have to have the website be something that
There
can
is-
be read or
There is ADA
described. Yeah.
accessibility. There are ADA accessibility issues too. That's a great point. Thank you.
If we don't have a policy on that, this would be a great place to add that in.
I will make a note to look into that, as well as the production of the PSBA model.
See, I'm still curious to see the PSBA model for this, but even just looking at the responsibility, I think it's going to be easier to kind of hash out the responsibility section when we have a better sense of what the purpose is. Because right now, the purpose of this isn't entirely clear to me. Like, what do we want to achieve through this policy?
Right, I think it's up to us, right?
Right, I'm saying I need more clarity around that because the purpose as it currently stands is just not working for me.
About the young people. Yeah. Okay. I don't think we need to, unless anybody really wants to, I have notes on the ARs that are very similar to the policy, but I think we should just wait to go over it with the PSBA model, since obviously we're not gonna bring this to the board, next week.
One general comment, as we're revising everything in the same way that we're replacing he, she with they, I think the parents, family, guardian is very clunky. So maybe just like always just do the same way we're doing like the district with a capital D, like just maybe always do parents/guardians, and it's always that instead of, because then it's like you had noted, it's like sometimes it's just families, sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's guardians, like just
Yeah.
always like what I don't know what if it's parents/guardians is always the way we're going to do it, or whatever it is, just pick one. And I think parents guardians is probably the most inclusive, right?
Or guardian/family, that's the only one that I could think of that would be more inclusive, but I think people expect to see the word parent.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking
So,
parents or
yeah.
guardians, so like
Parents and
parents/guardians,
Yeah.
all like kind of one thing. And not just for this policy, but just thinking throughout as we're revising everything and updating everything, just keep it consistent throughout. And then we don't have to worry about it's saying parents sometimes, or families, or guardians, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other feedback from the committee members?
One other question related to consistency, sorry. Sometimes we say youths, sometimes.
We should never say
Sorry,
youths.
My cousin Vinny, right? Youths, sorry, anyway, I digress. Pupils, students, youths, are these all the same? Like, or is there like a legal reason why we would say like pupil versus, I don't know.
The school code actually refers to them as pupils.
Okay,
quite
so
frequently.
sometimes, okay, because I think normally we would just say students,
Sure.
right? But I was just curious because all three of them are in this one policy, and so I was like, wait, is there like a legal reason why we're using some language sometimes? But I just for
Some of
consistency.
that out there, the SARS.
Yeah, right, I know.
I think it probably makes sense to keep, like, if we're referring to a law, a lot of times our policies
Okay, and that
it
makes
state
sense.
them verbatim for very good reasons,
Yes,
because that's
yes.
how courts interpret them based on
Okay.
that language. But when we're not, basing it on any sort of state law, then it makes a lot of sense to just use the colloquial language that
That's
people
what I was
understand.
curious.
Yeah.
And
Not youths.
Not
Yeah,
youths.
not youths. No, I agree, not youths.
Hopefully the law doesn't use youths. I wouldn't put it past them.
The criminal code.
Yeah. Larry's dying. He knows it does.
Right, maybe it stays then.
For the next meeting.
Well, so for the next policy committee meeting, I have 006.1 coming back with a sample
From DCIU.
from DCIU. Then I have the
9.
proposed communications coming back, looking at the model policy from PSBA. That I'm pretty clear on
Mhm.
in terms of the committee meeting. The changes that were recommended this evening for 903, 904, 906, and 919 I just want to get a sense if we feel the changes are such that any of those would come forward for first reading, or will they all come back?
I'm comfortable putting them through first read if others are. And I'm happy to send my changes. Yeah.
Actually, I think you had some written things.
Specific
that-
I have a
language.
lot.
Yeah.
If you.
Yeah, I
would not
can
mind
send that.
sharing.
I'll send them to you,
No,
Dr. Rucci, and then you can distribute to our solicitor.
Great, thank you.
That is, the rest of the committee agrees
I think
that
that's reasonable.
that set
Yeah,
is
I think
ready
that's
to
great.
take to the regular board meeting. Great. Any other questions or comments on the 900 section that we did or the earlier one?
Or, no, just, would the attention at the next committee meeting would be to bring the rest of the 900s?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so.
And they all
You
seem
have-
pretty related. School visitors, relations with parents, municipal government.
It is. Right now, our goal was to cover 9 more. So I mean, I think we can,
9, and then these 2 coming.
right, so that's 11.
By when?
That's a lot. Our
That's
next
pretty
committee
good.
meeting would be in 2 months.
That's what I think so too.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So we may see a recommendation between now and the May committee meeting to split that section into smaller
I
increments.
think so. I think
Or
so.
maybe even just look at the 2 that are brand new policies, maybe they would be moved, and just try to clean up, depending on the level of change.
Yeah, I think it'll depend on how much work these other ones need as well. I mean, I'm looking at the school visitors one, and that's room 99.
You know, with-
Oh, so is 908.
There's a lot that
Policies- With any
There's
policies
a
that
lot
are
to
that
do.
old, though, I think we should be, as a first step of action, looking at what PSBA currently recommends, so we're not
Yeah.
wasting time kind of giggling at youth policies. Which are still in the books, they're in effect.
Yeah,
That's the other
right,
thing, like, we need
yeah.
to get these cleaned up and, revised and approved.
And that might be a way that we prioritize, like, look, what are the oldest within that
Right.
grouping if we don't think we can get to them all.
Exactly.
Right, because volunteers, for example, is from 2016, last adopted, so hopefully it will be better.
And just for kind of a note to the public that the PSBA recommended updates and regulations are regularly communicated to the district through something they called the PNN, is the Policy News Network, right? So they are circulated and we have access to those. It's not something that we need to kind of request or chase down, that those are accessible to us in our board docs.
Great.
Okay, it's end of discussion on the agenda item. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody who'd like to speak tonight? Okay, just state your name and confirm your residency, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure. I'm Helene Conroy Smith. I'm a resident of Haverford Township. I'm sitting here listening to the language in the policies, and what I'm hearing is they're to be read and understood by the general public, the policies. Some of the policies written are for all the people, so people may have an equitable opportunity to speak freely and publicly. I'd like to remind you that the School District of Haverford Township policies cannot supersede the First Amendment, which is Congress or a governing body shall make no law or policy respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech, which I think some of the policies are doing while I'm listening here. Or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Policy 006 and 903 are concerning, since the use of offensive and obscene language is given to our children. Our children are reading books in our school libraries containing pornography, pedophilia, rape, and of youth under the age of 18 by an adult. However, the board is out of touch with these policies because you are in our own schools. We're giving things to our children. There are policies and governance that need to be followed. Our agenda, based upon public meeting law, our agendas are to be able to be read, that people can understand so they can participate and comment before the agency takes official action. The agendas that were given into the public are left to be questionable, and the public really doesn't understand what you're doing at the meetings. I want to say another duty that is expected federally is that the health and safety plan. That needs to be posted on the school operating status, and it's supposed to be published to the public by the LEA on the plan on the district's website for the use of the APR ESSER funds, and that's not done. So when you talk about policy and following statutes, there are legal recommendations and there are laws that we are to be following under your governance as you are school members, and I just want to remind you of that. Thank you.
Any other?
If I may say, if anyone can't find the health and safety plan as posted on our website, just come and see me or give me a call. I'm happy to point it out to you.
Seeing no other public comment tonight, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.